Hard to believe we're only 5 days into meteorological winter because we've seen so much wintry weather so far. A change is on the way. We're back to Atlantic-driven weather later this week, but will there be any more snow, ice and frost before the wet and windy stuff returns? And how wet and windy will the wet and windy stuff be? I'll be covering all of that in this week's Deep Dive. Thank you for joining me. Funnily enough, tomorrow marks the 1-year anniversary of the Deep Dive. We started doing them at the start of December last year. We've had lots of great feedback on this new format, lots of new subscribers, lots of likes and loads of comments. We've tried to build some topics into the Deep Dive based on your feedback, so keep that feedback coming. And if you've not subscribed, please do so you don't miss these in the future. Now, before we talk about the return to milder, wetter and windier weather, let's take a moment to marvel at some of the beautiful wintry scenes we've seen so far this December, such as this frosty scene in Shropshire over the weekend, and indeed some snowfall. This was Lincolnshire at the weekend as well. This was on Sunday when a system moved in and brought some snow to eastern and northern parts of England. And not forgetting the southwest, because we don't get much snow in the southwest, so we've got to make the most of it. I found a hill in Devon where I took my dog. First time Murphy has seen some snow, a centimetre or so, lying on a hill in Devon. A rare opportunity to take a picture of... We should have called her Snowy, that's what we were saying. We should have called her Snowy. She looks like Tintin's dog, and there she is in the snow. And she's the dog of a weatherman, so yeah. Missed an opportunity there, but she's called Murphy. But of course, we didn't see nearly as much snow in Devon as we saw in Cumbria. This is how it looked in Grasmere in Cumbria on Saturday, or it might have been early Sunday, but yeah, a huge amount of snow fell there. And a great example of crowdsourcing weather observations. This was WeatherQuest, a private weather company that crowdsourced the snow depths across parts of Cumbria, northwest England, and I don't know if you can see the finer details there, but essentially this area saw snow depths, according to public reports, and also mix that with radar imagery of 25, 30, and in some places 35 centimetres on the ground. That accumulated through Saturday because of a stream of heavy snow showers that moved through during the day. Let's take a look at what that looked like from the radar imagery. Really interesting, actually, because I was just saying to a colleague that it was essentially an area of showers that we saw. Let's pause it there. This was the start of Saturday. An area of showers that affected western areas. Now, if this was rain, which it typically is in the UK, we'd have seen, 20 to 30 millimetres of rain falling out of these showers on Saturday. No big deal for somewhere like Cumbria to get 30 millimetres of rain, but because all that fell from as snow, you multiply the depth of rain to get the depth of snow by a factor of 10. Typically, it varies depending on it's wet or dry snow, but we saw 30 centimetres of snow rather than 30 millimetres of snow because the air was cold enough. And look at that. That's start of Saturday. This showery stuff that was moving in. Also, not forgetting parts of North Wales, Western Scotland as well, seeing those snow showers. And we saw, look at that stream of showers moving in through the day on Saturday. Moves very quickly, actually. Let's rewind it a little bit there. And really, it was over a 24-hour period or so. We just got continuous showers moving in, obviously pepped up as those showers moved over the hills of Cumbria, the Lake District, seeing really quite extraordinary amounts of snow, a foot or so, and of course that led to some significant disruption. And it was a very localised event. If we rewind the clock there, Saturday afternoon, many parts of the UK, dry, crisp, cold, bright. But yeah, these showers moving in. The blue, we haven't got a key on this actually, I just noticed the blue is rain, the white is snow, you might already have guessed that. Many places stayed dry. It was the east that saw the showers previous to that. Look at that, that's rewinding it back to Friday, quite a few showers into the east. But by Saturday, what we saw was a return to more of a westerly influence, but still the cold air in place. And so we saw the showers more focused towards the west. Now, speaking of that westerly influence, if we just fast forward it slightly, and by Sunday, we saw a weather front move in. This was Saturday night, actually. There we go. Yeah, I know this because I was out on Saturday evening and it started raining while I was out. But we saw this rain move in, mixed with the cold air, and some quite substantial snow then developing across parts of central, northern, and later on eastern England. And so I showed you that picture of Lincolnshire in the snow. Beautiful scenes there. But yeah, parts of northern and eastern and central England saw that snowfall by Sunday. Then another area of rain moved in. Now these systems were progressively bringing milder air in with them. So the snow level all the time is rising. And this system during Sunday itself was bringing snow over the hills of Wales. But again, further east you were, the more in the cold air you were. And so, yeah, for Sheffield, for Peak District, for example, further snowfall there through into the start of Monday. But by Monday, you can see this marked contrast across the UK. It's all wet stuff, really, at lower levels across England and Wales at this stage. Hill snow for the Pennines, for North Wales. For Scotland, still in the colder air, but even here, rain and sleet at lower levels at sea level with the snow over the hills, likewise for Northern Ireland. And then continuing that sequence through, and really it was a soggy day across England and Wales on Monday. That's now pushing through, it's clearing. Let's pause it there, go to the final frame. Whoosh, there we are, lovely. It's gone back. Will you behave? Let's scroll it all the way to the final frame. Not quite the final frame. There we go. That's how it's looking midday Tuesday. Turning more showery, as most of this is rain now. It clears eastwards. But as that low clears eastwards, let's take a look at what it does, because that's quite interesting. That's the same time, midday Tuesday. The lows clearing east, and then the blues are returning across the UK. So some colder air is spreading widely across the UK. Not as cold as it has been during the first few days of December, but colder anyway. So yeah, the trend this week is for it to turn milder, but the Atlantic is making a stuttering start or a stuttering return. We've seen one system bring some milder air in, snow on the leading edge, eventually turning to rain, that clearing away. Then we're back into colder conditions for the next 24 hours, depending on what time you're watching this, of course, before the next series of fronts move in. And this is the more definitive return to milder, wetter and windier stuff. Now let's take a look at what all this means, because, of course, it's going to turn out to be quite a nice day on Wednesday once all that stuff moves through. So this is Tuesday afternoon, cloud, outbreaks of rain, clearing. Then we've got the colder air pushing through, and this is the start of Wednesday. And what you can see here is widespread blue skies, except for where we've got some freezing fog, because the winds are easing overnight, we've got the temperatures falling, a widespread frost, temperatures as low as -12 Celsius, possibly across some sheltered glens of Scotland, for example, especially where we've got some snow cover, and freezing fog patches. You can just about make them out here. So there's some through the Central Belt, through the Grampians, more especially parts of northern and central England, these freezing fog patches. They could last for some time through the morning, perhaps not clearing until early afternoon in places because of the light winds, the cold air in place. And where that happens, it will stay chilly. But further west, we've got the cloud building through Wednesday. And by the afternoon, that's 2 p.m, wet and windy stuff pushing into Northern Ireland, West Wales, Cornwall as well. Let's take a look at what that means for our temperatures. So this is the maximum temperature for Wednesday, and a marked contrast across the UK. As the wet and windy weather arrives into the west, we're into double figures in Devon, in Cornwall, for example, 11, 12 Celsius. But 2 to 4 Celsius for parts of eastern, northern England, parts of Scotland as well. And where we've got the freezing fog patches, of course, temperatures could stay below freezing through the day, and across upland parts of Scotland, northern England, temperatures could struggle to rise above freezing through the day. So that sets the scene. We've got the cold air in place across the UK, except for the far west, where we've got the rain arriving. And at this point, it's instructive to look at freezing levels. Now, we've shown these a few times on the deep dive because they're a really useful tool for determining at what height we're likely to see some snowfall. So this shows the height above sea level of the 0 degrees isotherm. In other words, as you go higher in the atmosphere, the temperature gets lower, normally, unless there's an inversion. and at some point you get the 0 degree line. Now where you've got very cold air, that's closer to the surface compared with where you've got the milder air. So the key here shows the greys and the blues are typically where you've got the freezing level down at 200, 400, 600 metres. Where you've got the greens arriving, that's where it's above 1,000 metres, so you're not really going to get much snow out of that at lower levels. So to determine where you're going to get snow, you typically subtract around 200 metres or so. It depends on the intensity of the precipitation. It depends on a number of factors, the stability of the air and so on. But let's just say 200 metres for now. And then you can have a good idea of whether you're going to get snow at lower levels or whether it's going to be over hills. And what's really interesting with this actually, if we play it forward, and we'll go to, so we've got the cold air in place, these blues, and some greys over the Scottish mountains. And actually, let's skip forward to start of Wednesday. The greens moving into Northern Ireland, that essentially means it's all rain for Northern Ireland, West Wales, as well as the southwest. But at the same time, we've got something known as cold air pooling across Scotland and Northern England. So this cold, dense air sits close to the surface. So we've got all these greys. And zooming in to Scotland, and what you can see later Wednesday is this real contrast between the greens in the west, where the snow is going to be confined to the tops of the hills or mountains, and these greys where the snow or the freezing level's right down at the surface because of the cold air pooling. So I'm showing you this because it just illustrates how messy it gets. We've got this sharp gradient between cold air and mild air. But as the mild air comes in, it comes up against that cold, dense air that's sitting at the surface and it mixes. But for a time, there's the likelihood that snow will come down to the surface because at the same time as that cold, dense air sitting close to the surface, we've got falling rainfall or snowfall. And as that falls, it cools the air as well. So you've got something known as evaporative cooling. So the precipitation falls through the air, it evaporates, and just like coming out of the shower, the water evaporates when you cool down. So it's cooling down the atmosphere at the same time as the mild air is rushing in. So all these factors combined make it quite a complicated situation. It's never straightforward in this country, is it, for determining where we're going to get snow? And this is certainly one of those situations. And let's just zoom it forward. And what you can see is the milder air is pushing in, but over some of these hills, the cold air is persisting. So over the Pennines there, we've got the freezing level really covering the hills, Scotland as well, especially around the Trossachs towards southeastern parts of the Grampians. That's where the snow level will be probably around 350 to 400 metres during Wednesday evening, this is. And it is likely to be building up over the hills at this stage with 5 to 10 centimetres perhaps by the end of Wednesday evening. And so that could affect some of the higher routes across Scotland, also the Pennines, Trans-Pennine routes as well. Not at lower levels, but some of those higher routes for a time seeing a transient spell of snow. The snow over the hills, 300-400 metres or so elevation. But, and again, this is at 8 p.m. now, what you can see is that milder air, the green, eventually mixes in and takes over fairly widely. You can see it turning all green by the start of Thursday across Northern England and eventually Scotland as well. So by the start of Thursday, so this Wednesday evening, that's snow concern for higher parts of Northern England and Scotland. And then the milder air well and truly takes over by Thursday morning. And this is illustrated very well by showing you the snow depth at 6 a.m. on Thursday. And what you can see is 5 to 10 centimetres, perhaps a smidge more over the tops of the Scottish mountains. This is the lying snow at 6 a.m. and really it's over the higher parts of Wales, Northern England and Scotland where we've got lying snow, not really at lower levels. But we've also got something here that shows the change in snow depth. And the greens, the green colours, show you where the snow depth is getting lower, or the snow is melting essentially, and the blues and the other colours show where the snow is building up. So on the left here, this is 6 a.m. Thursday, we've got at lower levels across Cumbria, Welsh mountains, parts of northern Scotland as well, at lower levels the snow is melting, but it's continuing to build up over the hills. Contrast that with 6 a.m. Friday, and this is the 24-hour change in snow depth. It's virtually all greens, apart from the very tops of the Scottish mountains. It's virtually all greens, Northern England, Scotland, And that just shows that, yes, there'll be some snow building up above 300-400 metres on Wednesday night, but by the time we get to the start of Friday, the snow is melting virtually everywhere apart from the very tops because it's so much milder as that air moves in. Where am I going next? We've covered snow depth, I think, turning milder, and once that Atlantic weather moves in, once that mild air takes over, it really is here to stay. Now, just to show you why, this is the picture again at midday Tuesday. That low moving in, a brief ridge of high pressure, a fine day for many of us on Wednesday. But as I mentioned, the jet stream, the low pressure, the weather fronts take over. And so quite a powerful jet stream actually, 150 or so knots. So that's about 160, 170 miles an hour. And that's roaring across the Atlantic. It's picking up these areas of low pressure. And here's one. Let's just focus on this one Thursday. Bit of uncertainty at the moment on the track and depth of this low, but it's certainly got some tightly packed isobars, and those tightly packed isobars are heading for Ireland first of all, and then they'll affect many southern and southwestern parts on Thursday night and into Friday. So I just want to quickly show you the wind gust graphic associated with that, because it could be that we're looking at gales and quite strong gusts by the time we get to Thursday night. Here's that system. The colours here correspond to the wind gust values on the right, and what you can see is 50, perhaps 60 mile per hour wind gusts across Ireland, perhaps a touch more in some exposed spots, and then pushing into Cornwall. What's that? By dawn on Friday. So a blustery spell, winds picking up, but that does depend on the exact track and depth of the low. Different computer models are saying slightly different things. Certainly a windy period, but the exact values of those gusts were yet to finalise those details at the moment. We'll keep you updated on that. And then the final thing I want to mention before we call this to a close is the rainfall for the rest of the week. Once that mild air takes over, once the Atlantic gets a grip across the UK, it's difficult to shift those kinds of westerly patterns. And the winds are going to be in a westerly phase for some time, but certainly with this jet stream starting to be, well, it's returning across the UK, but it's also going to be south shifted. We saw that through much of the autumn. So southern and southwestern parts of the UK were subject to some of the higher rainfall totals during the autumn. And unfortunately, that looks like the kind of setup that we're returning to for later this week. Here's the jet stream. When I say it's south shifted, there's the UK. Typically, according to climatology, the jet stream would be running up through the Faroes and Shetland, for example. It isn't through the rest of this week. It's hitting southern parts of the UK. So what does that mean for our weather patterns? It means that the rainfall will be focused across western and southern parts. And just a graphic to illustrate that, this here shows the probability of more than 30 millimetres of rainfall on Thursday. So the 24 hours of Thursday, once that system moves in, dumps some snow for some of the higher parts of northern England and Scotland, then it turns back to rain. But this shows the probability of 30 millimetres or more of rainfall, and it's picking out the strongest probabilities there across the Grampians, so southeastern parts of Scotland there, or southeastern parts of the Grampians, southwest Scotland, Cumbria, that combined with snow melt as well, of course, South Wales, Devon, Cornwall, so Dartmoor, for example. And then this shows the probability in the same period, Thursday, of more than 50 millimetres. And again, it's picking out those south-facing hills across the UK. Interestingly, it's also picking out, there's a little bit of signal for some other parts that aren't south-facing hills. Just over the Midlands there, perhaps, well, just over there, say, for parts of Yorkshire. And there's a signal there for something that we call a standing wave in meteorology. And what that means is that as the winds come in from the southwest, they're forced to rise over the hills of, say, South Wales, southwest England. As they're forced to rise, then they come down over the other side of the hills and descend again, but they've got some buoyancy. So they descend and then they start to rise again. They're kind of bouncing on the other side of the hills. And on the second time that they're pushed up, because they've got that buoyancy, they're not being pushed up because of the hills. That's called a standing wave. So they're pushed up first time over the hills. Then on the other side of the hills, you've got a bit of a rain shadow. So they start to descend again and you've got less rainfall. Then they continue with their buoyancy to rise again, and that's that standing wave. And yeah, this basically is not enough time to talk about this, but it shows 3 different computer models output for the rain Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And to summarise, it shows it's wettest over Western Hills, 50 to 60 millimetres over the hills of Wales, southwest Scotland, for example, in the Met Office model, 40 to 50 there over the hills of Western Scotland and Wales in the European model, 40 millimetres there for the American model, and not nearly as much rainfall over eastern areas. And so that basically summarises what we're going to see through Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Westerlies return, bands of rain and showers move in from the west. The wettest weather will be over Western Hills. There are a number of warnings in force now for rainfall, for South Wales, for southwest England, for southeast Scotland, for example, eastern Scotland, and Northern Ireland as well for tomorrow night. So do check those out if you're concerned. They're on the Met Office website app. But that's all I've got for you this week. Annie will be doing the 10-day trend tomorrow. Make sure you don't miss that. She'll be going into more detail about the weekend and next week. But thank you for joining me for this deep dive. Hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.